16-year-old Eva Blanco was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain. She was the eldest daughter of Manuel Blanco and Olga Puig. She was described by her friends and family as a relatively quiet girl, cheerful and responsible. She loved to play sports and was well liked in high school at the time. Eva played tennis with her friends earlier this afternoon before they decided to go to a local nightclub later. She told her mother prior to leaving about her plans, and she agreed to extend her curfew from 11 p.m. to midnight. Around 11:30 p.m., the girls decided to head home, with Eva being the first to separate from the group. One of the girls walked back home with Eva up until they reached a vacant lot with a shortcut to her house. This same shortcut was only 0.3 miles away from her house and was regularly used by classmates to get to high school, so Eva was pretty familiar with this route. However, she never reached home. Eva was a calm and punctual child, so when she did not return home by midnight, her mother became immensely worried. She began phoning friends who told her that Eva already left and was headed home. Her mother then called her father, a truck driver, and he circled the town with the help of his nephew, who was a local police officer and a father of one of Eva's friends. Finding no trace of her, he reported the disappearance to a police station after an hour of searching. However, the officers were apathetic, and the guard at the door said that kids her age were all on drugs and she's probably lying on a sidewalk somewhere. At 2:30 a.m., her family members continued carrying out their own search around the Algete area. Afterwards, Eva's father returned to the police station 15 times, criticizing them for not carrying out searches on rural roads or using their vehicles before sunrise. The police did not file a missing persons report until 8 a.m. At 12 p.m., the family contacted a local TV station, Telemadrid, to request assistance in publicizing Eva's disappearance. The following day, two men were walking near a construction site when they stumbled upon a deceased female body. At first, they believed the girl was a victim of a hit and run, but soon enough, officers noticed that the victim, who was lying face down on the ground, had several knife blows to her back. She was dressed with the same jeans, dark sweater, and mountain boots she wore on the night of her disappearance, with one sleeve of her jacket ripped off. They assumed that the victim was stabbed in the back while trying to run away from the attacker, and that both her and the killer reached the area in a car, though a ton of rain had washed away any tire tracks and other forensic evidence. There were some footprints that survived from the victim and a man wearing size 42 moccasins. By 3:30 p.m., the police notified Eva's family of her discovery, which caused commotion in Algete, a town of just 12,300 people with no recent history of violent crime. At 7 p.m., 200 people gathered silently in front of her home to condemn her murder, and a funeral service attended by 2,000 people followed 2 days later. Eva Blanco's autopsy report cited her cause of death as blood loss due to being stabbed in the back 19 times with a Navaja-styled knife at 4 a.m. The first stab to the side of the body must have been made while she was sitting in a vehicle, and the rest after she exited it and attempted to run up the slope next to the road. Though the first injury was deep and possibly fatal, the others to her ear and back of the head were superficial and interpreted as passionate, meaning out of a sudden strong impulse of rage or jealousy rather than a premeditated crime. Additionally, there was a great deal of DNA evidence that Eva was sexually assaulted. There was also a red fiber retrieved from her mouth belonging to a common type of car, confirming that she was in a vehicle after her disappearance. All this evidence led to a singular question: whose car did Eva enter? Because the body was found dressed and showed no additional signs of violence, the coroner and officers believed that the sex was consensual, and the murder was the result of an argument afterward. However, Eva's parents believed their daughter was kidnapped and raped at knife point, and then murdered to avoid prosecution of the sexual assault. The police thought the case would be closed soon after a short investigation. The first theory was that Eva knew her attacker and was approached by them in a car. They offered her a ride and she accepted, and then they went to the construction site, which was a known lover's lane, where they engaged in sexual intercourse before she was killed. The first suspect was her ex-boyfriend, who recently broke up with her, but he was very quickly ruled out after being questioned by the police. The investigation then turned to adult male family members that she might have trusted. Soon enough, on May 29th, the government announced that the police found the case more complicated than expected, and it no longer excluded a stranger as the perpetrator. However, Eva's friends believed that she would have never accepted a ride from a stranger, and that she must have been forced into the car. Neighbors linked the crime to a blue car seen in town, following another girl around midnight, and in it was a blonde man around 20 years old, but nobody ever recorded the car's plates. The police began retrieving DNA samples from Eva's male relatives and acquaintances in secret as they compared it to the semen's DNA, including a cigarette from her father that he left behind. No matches were made, but they were still convinced the killer was an adult male resident in the town or one nearby. Once police informed Eva's father that they compared his DNA to the semen found in his daughter's body, he began to campaign for other residents over 16 years old to provide voluntary DNA samples in order to catch the killer, with the town's mayor in full support. He received over 2,000 samples of hair and saliva, but after legal feasibility issues, only 45 people were tested that were deemed suspicious, according to the court's response. Unfortunately enough, Eva's case would go cold for 14 years. In 2007, a specialist re-examined the DNA and concluded that it belonged to a man not of European descent, but of North African descent. In 2013, the investigation picked up pace again. Over 1,000 men from Algete and other towns were investigated, and 208 of them provided DNA evidence, including criminals who were on leave at the time of the murder. The new judge allowed the opening and checking of the 2,000-plus envelopes of DNA from Eva's father in 1999, but not the testing of all the DNA samples. The same year, a Spanish television channel aired a program about the case titled Eva, A Cold Case. It included interviews from her parents, friends, teachers, officers working the case, and a popular psychologist and criminologist named Vicente Garrido Genovese, who gained notoriety when he helped identify the Spanish serial killer Joaquin Ventura in 1998, just a year after Eva's murder. However, Vicente disagreed with the police's theory of the suspect being a secret boyfriend of Eva's, as she likely would not agree to meet a lover 15 minutes before her curfew because of the risk of exposing her relationship. His criminal profile was a stalker who was not known or barely known to Eva. The lack of self-defense wounds could be explained because of the victim being threatened before agreeing to have sex with her attacker. The criminal would be of low intelligence, uneducated, with a low-skilled profession, and emotionally immature, since he sought sex with a teenager rather than a woman closer in age. He probably had no family because they would have noticed him coming late and inquired him about it. and it was possible that he continued his criminal career elsewhere in Spain or possibly in prison for other attacks. After the release of the program, a woman reported to authorities that she was suspicious of a man in the road construction site at 8 a.m. walking in the rain with no umbrella. He looked like he didn't sleep during the night and appeared to be looking for something before he got in his white Renault 18. Police deemed the testimony reliable as they heard the model before from other witnesses over the years, and it was compatible with the fiber retrieved from Eva's body. On October 28, 2013, a facial composite of the suspect was released. Since the DNA evidence was confirmed to be from a man of North African descent, the police petitioned for the 300 North African men residents in Algete in 1997 to provide voluntary DNA samples at the end of 2013. The response was overwhelmingly positive despite many who had left the town and country in the years. One man, Chell, a former resident of Eva's neighborhood who moved to France, was found to have 97% of his Y chromosome shared with the killer. This was only possible if the men were siblings. After they took DNA of a second brother who never resided in Algete and it provided identical results, the police immediately arrested the third brother, Ahmed Chell, on October 1, 2015, outside of his workplace in France. "52-year-old Ahmed Chell was born in Morocco in 1963. He was 34 at the time of Eva's murder. At 26, he married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in 1989 and became a citizen in the 90s. They shared 3 children, and his wife was 5 months pregnant with their third child when Eva was murdered. The Chells were never listed as residents of the town, as they lived in a caravan parked in a plant nursery, lent to them by his employer when he worked as a delivery man. He lived less than 3 miles away from the murder scene before moving to France in 1999. Though him and his wife were legally married, they separated, and he remarried a 24-year-old Moroccan student in France when he was 40. They shared 2 children, a 6-year-old and an infant at the time of his arrest. While in France, he worked as a welder for a farm machinery company and was reported to have a poor relationship with his co-workers. In fact, one described him as not very social, aggressive after drinking, and a little pervy with women. Former customers remembered him as a pervert as well. Once he was presented with DNA evidence, Ahmed claimed that he went for a walk alone that night, and 2 unidentified men grabbed him, took him to Eva's body, and forced him to masturbate over it. His ex-wife in Spain, however, told journalists that he had left in the company of his brothers as he'd normally do on the weekends. She also said that on that night, Ahmed told her he was mugged by some boys upon coming home late. It wasn't until after Ahmed's arrest when his brother said that they had been at the same party as Eva at one point, but she went back inside with her friends around 11 p.m. that night. Both wives were shocked at the news, as they described him as a good father and husband. Four days after his arrest, Ahmed unsuccessfully attempted to cut his jugular vein with a small glass in his cell in France. He then agreed to be deported to Spain to stand trial 2 days later. On October 13th, he agreed to give a DNA sample under the advice of his lawyer and was formally charged with murder, rape, and illegal detention. He pleaded not guilty, despite the DNA testing confirming him as the origin of the incriminating semen beyond doubt. On January 8, 2016, a team of prison psychiatrists and psychologists supported the lifting of anti-suicide measures placed on Ahmed since his arrest, as he repeatedly requested this himself. On January 15th, Ahmed claimed that two people forced him into a car and threatened him with a navaja to make him a job over Eva, who was inside alive. He insisted that he never penetrated her, but when asked why his DNA was found inside the body, he could not provide an answer. On January 29th, Ahmed was found dead in his cell at the Spanish prison, having hanged himself with his shoelaces. The prosecution formally ended the trial on February 15th. Upon learning of Ahmed's death, Eva's father was immensely angered as he looked forward to seeing him rot in prison for his crime and after a 16-year-long wait for justice. The parents expressed desires to take legal action against the government for not preventing his suicide, but there have not been any updates since. Ahmed's family also had a hard time understanding why the anti-suicide protocols were lifted, especially since he had tried it once before, but it was said that Ahmed displayed relatively positive attitudes upon evaluation and even signed up to volunteer for inmate support. Ahmed's family suspected his death was a homicide and demanded a thorough investigation, but there are no available updates on the matter. May Eva rest in paradise, and her family be showered with many blessings for all they endured. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you all for watching.